Hello, everybody. Welcome to our very first hatching hour. I just want to take a quick moment to just take this in because growing up where I grew up in the barrio, starting off my career working in the kennels, I always envisioned something like this. And that's the power of our mind. And that's the power of what we're going to do on these calls. And so I just wanted to just soak this in, say thank you to every one of you who is taking the most precious resource you have, your time. And you're coming here to support myself, to support Angel, to support Hatching, to support Jyothi, and to support yourself. These calls were designed with you in mind. My intention for this call is to provide value to your life at home and at work. And so it's just such an honor to be able to be on this virtual online gathering with every single one of you. And I think one of the things that makes me almost the most emotional about this is that I'm doing this with my partner in life and my now business partner, Angel. And so, we're going to talk about several things on this call, but before we get into it, I would just love to do a little introductions between me and Angel. And so, Angel, if you want to, take a few minutes and introduce yourself to this awesome community.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us and supporting Hatching Hour. It means a lot to Jose and I. Again, my name is Angel Guzmán, and I am Jose's husband and now co-founder, chief operating officer for Hatching. I'm really excited to bring my experience and skills that I've developed over the years to this new project. And to give you a bit of background of what I've done and where I've come from and why I'm here is I graduated from the University of Arizona with a degree in psychology and business. And from there, I went on to hold various positions within Wells Fargo. From there, I helped launch a financial exploitation unit where we investigated allegations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation for the state of Arizona. And then more recently, I am a certified pro advisor for QuickBooks, where I also started my own accounting firm and bookkeeping firm for small businesses. And throughout all of that, I'm also a professional violinist. And I worked at Disney, both at Disney World at Epcot and California Adventure in Anaheim. And I also toured around with various Latin artists around LA and the United States. So I'm really happy to be here. And I'm really proud of Jose and all the work that he's doing. It's really a treat to witness the journey that he has gone through. And I'm really excited to join him on a professional journey. And so I'm just happy that we are privileged and blessed enough to launch this project. So thank you.
It make me feel like I could cry.
Oh,
Thank you. Thank you. I could not and would not be who I am and have the things we have without you. That is for sure. Partnership, support, a really important part of Hatching. So a little bit about me, because I know there are some folks on the call that I haven't had the privilege yet of meeting. So I started my career working at an animal shelter in Tucson called Pima Animal Care Center, and I started Scoop and Poop. And over a period of 10 years that I worked there, I worked in a variety of positions, eventually becoming one of the leaders of that organization. And it was a real honor to be able to work alongside a team of people, a community of people who transformed that shelter. I was always lucky enough to be on stage talking about our successes and our wins and our lessons learned. But the truth is, it was about the team. The team was the one every day doing the work. So glory to the team always. And I see some of those folks from Pima Animal Care Center here right now who have been an important part of this whole experience. And within those 10 years, I left midway through that. 5 years, me and Angel were like, we need a change. And we moved to Florida. And so I worked at a shelter in Florida for about a year. And what's really cool is that I see some of my friends and colleagues from that shelter, from the SPCF Central Florida, on this call now too. So it was such a treat to be able to live in a different place, work for a humane society, gain so many new experiences, to bring back to Tucson, where I spent another 5-year stint at the shelter. And eventually I had this incredible opportunity to move to Los Angeles to work for Best Friends Animal Society. And in my final role at Best Friends, I was the senior director of people and culture. And what that meant was my job was to become really focused on the employee experience and the organizational culture, how we did what we did. And it was a great learning opportunity because in that experience, it really solidified to me how important it is to create a good experience for people at work. We spend the majority of our time and our life at work. And there's a stat, if you were to Google it, like how long does the average American stay at work or work? It's about a third of our lives. But there's a lot of people I know who've been working since way before 16, and they work way beyond when they retire, especially people of color. And so there's a lot of us who spend a much more of our life at work. And so it started me to think about how important it is to have an intentional experience at work. And if you are in a leadership position, a position of power, and where you are making decisions about what people make, when they work, who they work with, what projects they take on, that to do that with such level of integrity and intentionality can really transform someone's entire experience because of the amount of time they spend at work. And through all of that experience, I realized I wanted to start a company where we would focus on professional and personal growth. And that's what Hatching is. And that's why at Hatching, we say we help people live better and work better. And I want to take just, probably the next 15 minutes or so to tell you a little bit about the origin story of Hatching and how this came to be. And so I don't know about you, but I find that I learn the most about who I am, what I want, what I care about when I'm really going through hard stuff. In my personal life, in my professional life, it's in those moments that I feel like when you're under heat, under pressure, we are molding ourselves into become the next version of whatever it is that we want to become. And so for me, that started to happen many years ago. Many years ago, I made this conscious effort that I wanted to have a different and new relationship with my mom because I knew my mom was not a well person. And I could feel in my bones that I wasn't going to have decades of life and time with her. And I had a lot of resentment and I had a lot of feelings about the way I grew up. And because my mom was so dynamic and she was who she was, until I had a new way of relating to her, she would trigger me. And so for years, I just put a lot of distance between her, even my family, even my own community where I grew up from. When I started to make that conscious shift, I started to first begin the process of unpeeling my own onion and understanding what are the things that I'm going to need to think and do in order to have this new and different experience. And, the first time I had a big epiphany like that was actually when I was 16 and my dad passed away. When my dad passed away in high school unexpectedly, it shook me and it showed me that life is short, life is precious. And at that time, I was a 16-year-old with not a lot of direction on what I wanted in life. And his passing jolted me into asking myself, I think, the most important question that I continue to ask myself today. And that's, what do you want? What do I want? What do you want, Jose? What do you want for yourself? Because in that question, what do we want? We have to start to ask ourselves, like, is what I'm saying I want really what I want, or is it what my parents want for me? Is it what the society and community and gender roles or whatever, parts of your identity are a really key part of who you are that inform that? And so it was the beginning of my hatching, is what I now realize. And so it's so interesting because I think about my dad often, and I think about the gift he gave me was clarity. Because after he passed, I got clear that I wanted to work with animals. And a year later, I was in vet tech school. And 6 months later, I was working at Pima Animal Care Center. And so working at the shelter for all those years, when you're confronted with the best and worst parts of humanity, you have a decision to make. Do you want to continue to become cynical and judgmental about all the things that are happening around you? Or do you want to lean into compassion and curiosity? And so in 2021, I had this huge shift happen. And I got a call in January, and it was my mom telling me, mijo, I have been having multiple amputations because of my diabetes, and I can't do this anymore. And I want to go home. And I was like, do you know what that means? And she said, yes. I was like, that means that you're going to transition to hospice. No more amputations means no more treatment, means this is the beginning of the end. And so I took a leave of absence from work. Me and Angel got that call on a Friday. By Sunday night, we were back in Tucson. I hadn't lived in my childhood home since I was 18 years old. And so now I find myself caring for my mom in hospice, living in this home, and really witnessing the tragedy and the beauty of the end of a life. And when I was going through it, and I mean, anyone who's experienced loss of anyone that you love and care about, you know that it unearths you in a really big and meaningful way. And I had a really good friend and colleague of mine named Erica Westbay. And anytime I was going through it, she would always tell me, Jose, you're hatching. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, but okay, sounds cute. And it was like when I was going through the hard stuff, and when something awesome would happen, she's like, you're hatching. This is awesome. You're hatching. And so after my mom passed, I went into this deep reflection mode, asking myself, probably for the second most significant time since my dad had died, Jose, what do you want? What's next? Because I could feel in my bones that it was time to make some big changes in my life. Losing my mom, repairing my relationship with her, and then losing her when I was the closest to her, changed me. And I knew I was in a position where everything in my life didn't fit quite right anymore. And people would tell me, Jose, you've changed. And I'm like, I know. And it wasn't that change. Because what I started to do was begin to connect the dots for myself. I started to really ask myself, okay, Jose, what do you want? And what are the experiences? What are the practices that have carried you to become the person you are, to be surrounded by people that love you, to have work that's meaningful and fulfilling, to be a kid who grew up in the barrio who now lives on Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica? I'm not saying that in any kind of braggy way. I'm saying that because it's a testimony about what is possible when you believe in yourself. That's the reason I say that. And I started to really connect these dots. And I was like, oh, self-worth started to come into play. I started to just deconstruct all of these things. And eventually what it became was the Hatching ethos. This is our framework on how we approach our work here at Hatching. I like to say are a compassion-based company that focuses on professional and personal development and growth. And we do it through these 7 ethos, these pillars. These are practices, these are values, these are virtues. I start with self-worth because self-worth is our internalized glass ceiling that we put on ourselves. When we have a healthy self-esteem, when we have confidence and we believe in ourselves, when we know that we are good enough by simply being, we can achieve incredible things. And the reverse is true. I saw that when you have low self-worth, you accept things, behaviors from people that are less than what you deserve. Gratitude is so important because so many of us live in the future. That's where anxiety lives. In a positive way, I envision everything that ever happens to me before it happens. Visualization also is somewhat in the future. And so everything, I don't like to think of things as good or bad. Things are, on a spectrum, and it's how you relate to them. Resentment and guilt, those are things that oftentimes are rooted in the past. What I love about gratitude is that it brings us to the present moment, which is the only thing that's real, which is the only thing we actually have. It's the most precious thing. It's where our breath lives. It's where our attention lives. It's where our connection to each other deeply lives. And so that's why gratitude is important. It brings us to the present moment. I mentioned that I started a journey wanting to repair the relationship with my mom. And the first thing I knew I needed to do was start to approach her with way more curiosity as opposed to judgment. This also served me when I was working in an animal shelter because I operated for years through judgment. And then I started to realize that I started to become this resentful, cynical person that was not very nice, was not as optimistic as I would like to be. And it was hurting me and the people around me. And so I saw the benefit of being curious, not only in my personal life, but in my professional life. So curiosity started to become the antidote to my judgment. In the context with my mom, I then started to, through my curiosity, learn about her. I started to listen to her. I started to ask questions about her life. Instead of judging her for being the way she was, I started to try and understand what are the things and experiences in your life that led you to think this way, to respond this way. And I learned a lot. And I'll be honest, there was still things that I wasn't satisfied with. There was still some harm that happened as a result of who she knew how to be. And so there was this really critical stage of radical acceptance. Radical acceptance to me is synonymous with surrender. Surrendering in the context of like a spiritual, like surrender isn't like surrender. It is just letting go of the things that do not serve us. And so radical acceptance allowed me to understand with my mom, even at work, this situation, this circumstance, I cannot influence. I cannot change this thing because for me, I tend to spend a lot of time suffering because I can't accept whatever is in front of me. Even to this day, the lessons I'm learning right now in live time is radical acceptance that like with starting a company, not everything's going to be buttoned up the way you want with the timeline that you want. You know, there's only a certain amount of hours and energy in the day. So radical acceptance has rooted me in what I actually can control, which are my thoughts, the feelings that I want to really focus and fixate on, and what I do, my actions. So that's how radical acceptance helps me. I put boundaries in here because when you start to do any of this work where you're like radically accepting somebody or something that still may be problematic in for whatever way, maybe it or the person or the situation is triggering, this is where boundaries come in place. How I like to think of boundaries, they are the security system we put around ourselves to safeguard our mental, emotional, physical, and financial well-being. Boundaries are really healthy. They've been important as I've started to divorce my identity and my self-worth from what I produce at work. I'm someone for who years I was the job, and I can fall into that. And I've had to put healthy boundaries with work. They safeguard our well-being. Forgiveness to me released me, and not just with my mom, but with people at work, with the community that I was so busy judging for so long because I needed someone to blame for all the animals that were coming in that we were having to take care of and make hard decisions on. So forgiveness is so important. There's this saying that I love, which is resentment is poison meant for somebody else that you take. And so forgiveness doesn't mean that we continue to allow people in our lives that continue to hurt us. It means we don't allow the things that other people do, or perhaps that the mistakes we have made from preventing us from moving forward in our lives. And even at work, think about this. At work, we spend the majority of our time with the people we work with. And there'll be a conflict. And what happens when there's conflict? Maybe they do a reorg, they move someone, they have like a reset meeting. But like, how often are you actually having a conversation with someone who really hurt you or you hurt them? And you're talking about it through the lens of forgiveness. So forgiveness matters. All of this comes together because it's about compassion. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for others, because I really deeply believe that compassion is the answer. At Hatching, we will change the world and make it a more compassionate world by helping people live with these things. Compassion, in many ways, it's misunderstood. And so a lot of what we're going to do at Hatching Hour is talk about compassion. And so this is just the framework. This is the heartbeat of Hatching. This is when you hire us, when you work with us, when you come to this Hatching Hour, this is the spirit of what we're going to be bringing to the table. And it's what I think makes us different as a company. It's why we're going to do business differently than your average professional and personal development organization and companies. The next thing I want to share with everyone is just a little poll because I'm curious, looking at all of those ethos, which one do you want to work on the most? All right. I'm looking. So it looks like self-worth. Perfect day today. Boundaries coming in, those two coming in at ties. Radical acceptance. Beautiful. Forgiveness at 20%. Awesome. Okay, so now I want to talk just a little bit about what are we going to do on these calls? The goal of these calls is to build community. I mentioned earlier on the top of the call that part of what's allowed me to hatch is support, because in a support system, there's also some accountability. And making any kind of change takes time, and it requires support oftentimes. And so I want you to think of this community as a place where we can come together, we can learn about these different concepts, we can see and pick up the things that make sense for our lives, and we can leave the stuff that doesn't. And we can do it in a place where everyone here is working on their personal and professional growth, because everyone here wants to have more peace, wants to live with more compassion, operate with more compassion. My theme this year is I am preserving my peace at all costs. I really, really believe that we all deserve to have a life filled with happiness and peace and contentment and purpose and meaning. And that's what I hope we're able to do here. So the way these calls are going to work, they're going to happen twice a month, first Wednesday and the third Wednesday of every month. And at Hatching, I say we help people live better and work better. Live better, personal development, work better, professional development. Today's call is a live better call. So it's going to be focused on our personal development. That's why the theme and the topic is self-compassion. Our next call, which occurs on the 20th, is going to be more about compassion at work. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the call. And now I am very excited to introduce to you a dear friend, a mentor, and someone that I have just the highest levels of respect for. And so I'm going to read you a little bit about who she is and what she's done, because you just got to know what you're getting here today. So Dr. Jyothi Robertson is an internationally recognized veterinarian consultant, boarded in shelter medicine, and a founder of a nonprofit that explores interdependence and contemplative practices. Areas of interest in shelter medicine include increasing access to veterinary care, shelter operations, organizational design, and the mental well-being of all engaged in the work. I love that. Jyothi has served on numerous boards and professional committees in management positions on a national level. She was the medical director for Oakland Animal Services for multiple years during the pursuit of a residency in shelter medicine through the UC Davis Corrett Shelter Medicine Program, all while starting her consulting business, JVR Shelter Strategies. And there's more. Pre-veterinary medicine, Jyothi studied anthropology and education at Princeton University, examining cultural and race dynamics while performing field work in Asia. Dr. Robertson has practiced meditation for over 40 years and has completed courses and certifications in trauma-informed mindfulness, meditation, spiritual philosophy, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, deep listening, and is currently pursuing a multi-year intensive dharma training program. Her passion project for the past 4 years has been the development of the Journey You Own, a fiscally sponsored nonprofit organization for weaving spirituality and awareness through highlighting social justice, animal welfare, the climate crisis, and education reform. Along with this project, she teaches high school and elementary youth about veterinary medicine and animal well-being while consulting with animal shelters. Jyothi is a mother to 3 wonderful children, a wife to her husband, Tim, and a friend and mentor to many. Thank you, Dr. Robertson, for being here with us today. It's an honor.
Great. Thank you, Jose. It's fabulous to be here with you, Angel, and everyone else that's here. What a great turnout today.
Yes. I was thinking about Hatching Hour and this really being the beginning of so many things to come for our company. I was like, who do we want as the first guest? And it didn't take me long to just instantly think of you because of who you are. And I think that bio kind of gives people an idea of the expansiveness of what you have to offer. And, I'm always so curious about people like yourself who have such a range of experiences in your life. I want to know more about your background and how self-compassion has transformed not only your life, but the lives of the people you work with in all of your capacities.
Well, my background, I think you spoke to some of it professionally, but from a personal standpoint, I'm an immigrant. My parents moved to Wisconsin when I was a child, so I grew up in Wisconsin, and that was different. It was awesome. I like cheese and chocolate and things like that come from Wisconsin. And I grew up there, but I was definitely very shy, incredibly shy. Like I barely spoke in school growing up, even through high school, partially because I felt really different than everyone else. And also partially because I have a brother who is my best friend and has been for years, but I always felt like I wasn't quite as good at everything as him. So I was living in his shadow, and that was hard at various times. So I kept to myself and I stayed quiet, and I'm pretty small for anyone who's seen me. I'm 5 feet tall, and that's me fully grown up. So you can just imagine growing up in Wisconsin. I was really tiny, and so I blended in into the background. How about that? I didn't blend into the room, but I blended into the background. And it was only after I went to college, and really when I was in college and I started studying race relations and meditation, that I recognized that I was not really looking at myself and in a compassionate way, that I was looking at everybody else and thinking about how others are doing their work and trying to help others, whether it be in anthropology or being a third grade teacher and everything that I did. But I was avoiding myself. And I was avoiding finding out more about myself and my own stories, and trying to understand where I came from. So I veered off on another path, went traveling internationally, and went to various ashrams and started really self-meditation, where I'm sitting in silence, not just listening to others. And I think that was the initial opening for me, was in childhood. Later on, it was after veterinary school that I found out about different things related to my health. You mentioned, Jose, that there's certain factors, some events that happen in your own life, with your mother and with your father when you were 16, that really impacted you and that shifted that view that you had of yourself. So I had that same occurrence in 2006, where I was confronted with the possibility of death, right? And everybody is confronted with the possibility of death every single day. It feels and felt different at that time when it became very personal and real. And I know that there are many on this call who have had this similar experience, where you're confronted with some sort of a health situation or something that shows up newly. So for me, that was a time to become more introspective. That was a time for me, crazily enough, I called up Kate Hurley at that time, who happens to, I think, to be on this call, and just called her up and showed up and said, I want to do a residency. And my feeling was that I wanted to impact a lot of animals in as quick amount of time as physically possible. And again, I wasn't thinking about myself. I still wasn't being compassionate to myself. I was looking outward and thinking, okay, well, what can I do? Let me get as much done as possible. I was pregnant with my first child. I'd finished vet school. I was a veterinarian already. And I was really out there thinking about, what is it that I can put out to the world? And as I started the work, and actually started working with shelters after I started JVR, Shelter Strategies, I saw that I wasn't able to ground myself in who I was being without first opening up myself to offering myself some compassion, to seeing where I was feeling disappointed or where I felt like a failure. I'm really good at failing exams. People assume that I pass everything, and I managed in failing everything from the national vet exam to my residency exam twice, which is, kind of one of those big things when everybody's waiting for you to pass something. And so there's a sense of disappointment then that comes up, right? So I had to turn that around in a way that offered myself some compassion and said, you know what, it's okay. Like it's all right. That doesn't identify, it doesn't label who I am, right? Those are all activities. That's not who I really am. That's just what other people see of me. And so that was, I think, the start. And kind of that moving along that trajectory over time was becoming more and more aware about the importance of self-compassion and the wisdom that's held within compassion itself when you offer it to yourself. I actually think it's easier to offer it to others, which is why I so appreciate you, Jose, saying that we're going to start with ourselves. You know, that's really the hardest thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think especially there's so many people on this call, many of whom I know are in a field where they're in compassion-oriented fields, whether they're helping animals, peoples, exclusively people. I know there's some folks on here from the human services sector. And so often I see folks who are in a caregiving role putting their own needs and well-being on the back burner. And I'm someone who did that for the majority of my career in the beginning. And it's an easy default for me to go back into that mode. And I've been with intention cultivating self-compassion. And it was really uncomfortable because it felt kind of selfish when I first started to kind of do things to prioritize my own needs and starting to say no. Like I remember watching this Oprah show once and she was talking about like the power of no and how no is a complete sentence. And I was like, what? No, you can say no to people you love, to things that you care about. But because, you know, in our field, you say no. And like, there's this looming thing of like, well, an animal could die. And I think that's the hard part. So like in your experience, what have you found are like the top reasons self-compassion is something people struggle with?
Yeah, I think you just noted it, that our fear of noting and seeing failure as a shared experience, or seeing suffering as a shared experience, is a part of it. When we feel that it's just us that's involved and that we can't set these boundaries for others, that it's hard to say no because there are other people that have set expectations for who you are, who you're being. And it's having that confidence. And again, I'm going to bring it back to wisdom because I think that's a component of compassion that distinguishes it from some of the other terms that we use, like empathy and others. That when we have that self-compassion, that we recognize that the only way that we can be ourselves and actually out there helping others is, first of all, by recognizing our own sadness, our own suffering, and being able to take care of ourselves the way that you're describing, Jose, with prioritizing your own mental, emotional, spiritual well-being. That is what brings you to your work in a full way where you can actually do the work. Yeah, and that's what I was seeing. It didn't matter how many different processes, efficiencies, productivity tools, whatever it was that I was giving, right? So I'm working as a strategist, as an organizational design and efficiency consultant, walking through animal shelters and giving them tools to maybe do surgeries faster or clean up kennels better, whatever it is, or even the design of the organization itself. And none of that matters if the people who are doing the work aren't able to meet me where I'm at when I'm speaking to them. If they are not feeling themselves whole, if they're feeling overwhelmed and sad and just feeling that sense of suffering and failure within themselves, the protocols don't make a difference. None of that makes a difference.
I've always found your work to be so interesting because, you know, you do all this incredible work inside organizations that far exceed just talking about veterinarian type things. Like you're talking about organizational design, you're talking about organizational culture. And in the context, you talk a lot about efficiencies and being able to be more productive. And in most efficiency and production meetings I've ever had in my career, the well-being of the staff is not the thing that's being balanced in all of that. If anything, it's like do more, produce more, save more with the same or less, you know? So when you walk in as a veterinarian, how do you balance like promoting efficiency and productivity and combating things like burnout?
I think that a part of what you're describing is connecting with the individuals that I'm meeting and understanding what it is that drives them to do the work that they're doing. So in our consulting or in our conversations, finding out what is that spark? What is it that gets them excited about that work? And then going from that conversation, starting there with that connection and recognizing that human connection first. And I think that's especially important in our field, Jose, because we're so focused on animals that we forget that it's really the people component that's critical. And once we have those conversations and start meeting people through really listening to them and understanding some of the sadness. And again, I sometimes go back to suffering because of the way that I have been trained. So I use that word, but that idea of whatever angst you have within yourself, that you're being heard by somebody else who's coming in. So that, I think, is the first step, is having those conversations. And then beyond that, again, this idea of productivity is a construct. It's a mental construct that we've put in, that we have to achieve certain things, and that if we don't do that, it's going to lead to animals dying. Okay, that's in our field. But think about all the other mission-driven fields. And my children were part of a startup where they started up a nonprofit related to the ocean space. So people there are feeling like, oh my goodness, our oceans are dying. We've bleached our corals. We have fish that are dying, different species. So there's an overwhelming feeling, regardless of what profession or field you're in. It can be in the education space. It can be in the social justice space, again, in climate change. And if you allow that storyline to take over, meaning that we need to do more, hurry up, because everything is going to collapse without us being there, then everything will collapse, because we're not taking care of ourselves, and we're the ones that hold the structure together, right? We need our own individual self-worth and our own strength to be able to actualize the work.
For folks, who are in a position of leadership, who think about things like efficiency and productivity, just thinking about all the things you shared. And I think because many of us don't have control over what our bosses decide our new goals and objectives are going to be. And so I often think about, in those situations, this is where it's about getting really clear about what is it that each of us as individuals need. What are the boundaries we're going to put in place to safeguard that, our self-worth and our emotional well-being, because we can't leave our self-worth up to others. And I think, like, to what you said, like, when our self-worth becomes completely entangled in what we do, even if what we're doing is altruistic and it's awesome and it's so purposeful and meaningful, if you're still giving at a rate that you're not refilling your cup, that is where, like, the burnout happens. And it's within that burnout that we start to act outside of ourselves. We perhaps speak and act unskillfully. And so for everyone on this call, one of the things I want you all to start thinking about is, like, what is it that you need, and so that you can start to prioritize that your self-worth, so you can know, like, hey, I am worthy of peace. I'm worthy of being happy. I'm worthy of contentment. I'm worthy of feeling like after working 8, 10, 12 hours, it was enough and I am enough, even if there is still so much work to do, because we understand, because we radically accept that in our industry, for instance, that animals will continue to suffer needlessly as long as people continue to suffer needlessly. For me, I'm all about practical advice too. And so could you share with us, like, 3 transformative, actionable steps anyone can take to start their own journey towards cultivating more self-compassion?
For me, it comes through sitting in silence That's probably the first thing. And I know that seems really simple and a little bit silly,
It's
perhaps.
scary.
It is scary. So start slow. Start with 30 seconds or maybe a minute or maybe even 2 minutes, just to sit in silence and see what arises. Become present maybe to the breath or to your body. And I think that brings it to the okay, so there's silence. Silence is one activity that is so easy to do and yet so hard when we practice self-compassion. The second I would say is having a sense of body consciousness and self-awareness of our bodies and how we are an experience in itself. Because when we sit in silence, we're sitting with our bodies, we're sitting with our breath, we're sitting with our physical presence. And yet it's not also who we are, right? This body is an experience, but there's so much more. So it's becoming comfortable and compassionate about ourselves in relation to our bodies, in relation to ourselves, which, can be incredibly hard and challenging and traumatizing and difficult. So doing this at your own pace, having tools to be able to do this slowly and recognizing the breath in a really meaningful way. I put together a handout for this particular session on compassion, which blends a module that I've put together on contemplative practices, productivity, and well-being that Maddie's Fund has supported in Maddie's University. So some of you I know are not part of the animal well-being space. So those of you who are not, you might not be as familiar with Maddie's University, but it's a free module that has meditations on it. And then we also host meditations at the Journey You Own. So you're welcome to come to any of ours. We have specific ones that are also meant for people who identify as BIPOC individuals, because there's a different layer that I like to do in a safe space in those particular meditations. I think that the other component of self-compassion is exactly what you said, Jose. You said you offered yourself some phrases, like, I'm okay. It'll be all right. Just placing your hand on your chest or cupping your hands together. I mean, there's some really simple grounding practices that we can do that have us back in our bodies, out of our thoughts, out of our worries, out of the future and the past, and get us into the present moment. And that's where self-compassion shows up, right? It's in the present moment.
I just want to say that I've been meditating with you, Jyothi, probably for over a year now, and it fundamentally has begun to rewire my mind. And I'm someone who really believed that I couldn't meditate. And your guidance has shown me it really is about just sitting and breathing and paying attention to your thoughts. It's not about not having thoughts. It's about knowing that they're there, recognizing them. And because of, I think, my sitting process and my practice of and I started in the beginning with 1 or 2 minutes. And now, I'm able to sit for 30 minutes to an hour. It has changed my life. And the reason I'm really encouraging everyone on this call to do it is meditation in the Western world, for so many of us, feels unattainable. It feels just like something we can't do. It's not like our thing. Please try. And try for, give it the good college try, not just once, but really join. Jyothi has all those links that we put in there, connects to those. It has opened up my mind, which has opened up my heart, which has changed how I behave. And our behaviors over time is our character. And I think at the end of the day, how we treat people, our impact on people deeply matters. That's the legacy we have. And that's the thing that I really hope we can all learn and do together. And there's weeks where I drop the practice. It's kind of like the mental and emotional spiritual gym, you need to go regularly to see results. But it's okay if you have moments of not going. So be gentle with yourself. If you're a first time meditator having a sitting practice, maybe don't do the hour. Maybe start with something more tangible. And so, Jyothi, for an experience, can you guide us through something short, like a short practice that all of us can get, dip our toe in the water of what it might feel like, to sit with your thoughts and with your body?
Yes, I can definitely do that. Let's do it as a body awareness kind of breath meditation. Okay, so before I begin, if any of you are seated in a chair like me, go ahead and just get comfortable. If you're wearing high heels or stilettos, maybe take those off so you can put your feet flat on the ground. Let's go ahead and close our eyes. Let's start with a few deep breaths. Inhaling through the nose and exhaling out of the mouth. Becoming present to where you feel the breath most strongly in your body. Maybe in your chest or in your bellies. Noticing and allowing it to return to a natural rhythm. Gently turn your awareness to the breath as it enters your nostrils, as it enters your face, relaxing the muscles of your face and your cheeks. Noticing if you're holding any tension in your jaw. And breathing into that space. Now relaxing your eyes and your eyelids, the space between your eyebrows. Allowing the breath just to gently enter, feeling the tension melting with each exhalation, resting more deeply into this practice. Now draw your awareness down from your face, through your throat, into your shoulders and in your neck. Noticing if you're carrying any tension from the day in these areas and breathing into this area. Allowing whatever arises to arise. Now drawing the breath more deeply into your chest and into your heart space. Become present to your heart by placing a hand on your chest, if you choose. Relaxing into being here in a community of practice. Notice how the breath softens the area around your heart and your chest. Offering yourself some self-compassion. Guiding yourself to noticing that you're here now, present in this body, in this space. Now you can take a few more deep breaths, placing one hand within the other, but you're cupping your hands together in a comforting gesture. One more final breath. Drawing your awareness back to being here together in this meeting space. With that, I invite you to offer yourself some gratitude for being here, for taking this time for yourself to come to the hatching hour, to join us in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyothi. That was beautiful. You know, something that I do is I call them compassionate breaks on my calendar, especially on days when I know I'm really busy. If I wake up and I'm, in a mood, I will add time on my calendar, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I'll go on YouTube, I'll go to your website and I get a guided meditation. Sometimes what I like to do if I can't sit still, there's walking meditations that like you can listen to on your AirPod, and it's going to bring like a level of intentionality as you just walk, through your neighborhood, wherever you are. And I really encourage everyone to start to create the space to do something for yourself, just to get a moment to show yourself some love, to connect to your breath, to your body, because you're worthy and deserving of that. And I promise you, you will be so much more impactful and effective in whatever it is you care about in life if you're able to put, your oxygen mask on first. So a few things before we end is thank you, Jyothi, so much. And our next call is on September 20th, and I'm very excited. We have Sarah Shire, say that 10 times. She is the founder and executive director of Compassion It, and author of A Case for Compassion: What Happens When We Prioritize People and the Planet. This is her new book. I can't wait to dive into this. And Sarah's going to be with us, and we're going to be talking about compassion in the workplace and how, and in the context of burnout, and what can we do to combat burnout. What are the skills and the mindsets that will bring us more peace and more compassion? And finally, our website is officially live at Hatching. Go ahead, check it out. Give us some love. On there, you can see how you can connect with us on YouTube, on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok. But it was such an honor to be here with all of you today. This is just the beginning. I envision these to get bigger. I envision these to continue to provide an impact and value to all of our collective lives. And I'm just so beyond grateful. My mom is here with me. I have a picture of my grandmother that I've been looking at. And I'm just in so much gratitude and awe of the places life brings us. And so thank you for being such an important part of our journey.